This video was not sponsored by Riot. Obligatory disclaimer, I just really like the game and was inspired to make this video. Hey there! Welcome to Riot's Legends of Runeterra launch, Riot's brand new card game that just launched for PC and mobile devices. Straight out of the gate from the open beta, Riot's added an all-new region, Bilgewater, which adds a whopping 120 new cards to the game, 11 of those being new champion cards and all new ways to play. Now, I had the opportunity to play in the beta and familiarize myself with the playstyles of various decks and card interactions, but if you're hopping onto the game fresh off the release, it might be a bit daunting to learn about everything this game has to offer. Well, not to worry, that's why I am here, for I, Psychometry, will serve as your guide into the fascinating game that is Legends of Runeterra. Now keep in mind, although I am a certified gold player, I'm definitely more in the casual side of playing, so my goals are to optimize fun first and viability second. So if you've clicked on this video in hopes of beating the best of the best this game has to offer, to be the next disguised toast, you're fresh out of luck. But if you want to be entertained and to have the most fun, welcome aboard. Get it? Because it's the Bilgewater deck I put in the title of the... You get the idea. Speaking of which, that's the topic of today's video. Having played the beta, I've gotten to play some version of a deck from every region, so when I saw that Bilgewater was released, some fresh new content, I just knew I had to play with that region for this video, but I'll be sure to give the other regions some love in later videos. So with that in mind, I mustered up all the points and wildcards I saved up to build me a Bilgewater deck. But with 11 new champions and any combination of them drastically changing what cards you'll put in those decks, how on earth was I gonna choose? Was my initial thought until I bestowed my eyes on this beefy boy. Yes, the card that drew my attention was Nautilus, because the deck that got the most playtime from me during the beta were Demacian decks, and there was no better feeling than getting a Garen and maxing his stats until the enemy surrendered out of fear of his enormous biceps. Nautilus gave me a similar feeling, with his base stats of 0-12 with the tough keyword already making him a better tank than base Garen. Leveling up and making him into a 13-13 really makes him live up to his title of Terror of the Deep. Plus, with the fearsome keyword, it meant your opponent would have to put their best units to stop him. If not, it was basically a free win. With my main champion in mind, that meant I was playing a deck centered around the toss keyword, as your win condition and Nautilus's level condition was to go deep. Now is the time to make as many sexual references as you want. Deep and toss were introduced with the launch. Deep being the state you entered once your deck went down to 15 or less cards, and toss being the mechanic of throwing away your cards. Cards that had the deep keyword would then gain a 3/3 stat increase whenever you went deep, and with Nautilus giving every sea monster type a mana cost decrease of 4, copying any unit card you've tossed with a base mana cost of 4, as well as Lure of the Depths that decrease sea monsters everywhere, and with an allowance of 3 of these cards in your deck, under the correct conditions, you could be playing monsters with large attack and health stats for as much or as little as 1 or 0 mana. What all that mumbo jumbo boils down to is that your deck should consist of 3 Nautiluses, I'll explain why in a bit, as many sea monsters as you can shove in it, 3 Lure of the Depths, as many spells with the toss mechanic, and a Maokai to maximize your toss mechanic, with the added bonus of it, if you can level up Maokai, you'll obliterate your enemy's deck, so there's not much they'll be able to do against you in that situation. With that in mind, you're going to want to bolster your remaining deck allowance with low cost cards, as most of the decks centered around winning between the 7 to 10 mana bracket. My focus surrounded around Warning Shot and Jagged Butcher, as this 0 cost spell suddenly turns your 1 cost 2/2 into a 1 cost 3/3 because of the new mechanic Plunder, or dealing damage to the enemy nexus before playing a card. This means it will win and survive just about any first turn trades, as most 1 cost cards sat around 1-1, 2-1, or 1-2. It also doesn't hurt to hit the enemy nexus for free. I also had Jailbreak, because getting a mystery 1 cost was always fun. Bonus points if you got a Warden's Prey, so that you got an even better card after it died. A Shell Shocker because having bonus mana early on never hurts, and a Jaw Hunters for challenging strong enemies in the 4 to 6 mana periods while drawing a sea monster to set up destroying my opponent's orifice in the rear. Now that I've constructed the deck and I've explained your main objective to winning the game, the last part of this video I'm dedicating to explaining a few key cards in this deck, as well as alternative objectives you can go for to force your opponent to surrender/win the game. Starting with cards you'll want to pay attention, let's start with the card that saved my ass one of many a times, Devourer of the Depths. A 6-cost 4/4, it'd be downright laughable to use if it wasn't for its effect, to obliterate any enemy on the playing field that has less health than Devourer currently has. This means that when you go deep, or add any health modifiers before you play the card, any unit they've played that has less health is forfeit, and the only counter to this is if they have a quick play health boost that can up that unit's stats to equal or higher than your Devourer. Now to some of the veterans or beginners watching, you might be thinking, you big dumb loser, I'll just play Prismatic Barrier, or Fear's Riposte, or even Unyielding Spirit. You can't do anything against a unit that can't die. Wrong. All those effects from Barrier to not dying means that any spell/effect that does damage or kills can't harm your unit. That's correct. However, Obliterate is to remove a unit from play, meaning it does no damage, doesn't kill your unit, it just takes it out of the game. As an added bonus, that unit can't be revived from the dead, and best of all, doesn't trigger last breath effects. So to all the Fiora or Shadow Isle card mains out there, sorry to tell you, they are not safe. Nor is anyone else for that matter. On a side note, Unyielding Spirit is a very popular card right now, for obvious reasons, and given that there's only 2 ways to deal with it right now, silencing or obliterating, it's a must-have for a sea monster deck, and you should have 3 to deal with any situation. And with the cost going down to 2 to 0 with a 3/3 increase, it's gonna be the bane of anyone who's setting up their winning card. The next cards I want to focus on are Riptide and Scrapshot. Scrapshot is a 7-cost spell that includes the toss mechanic. It's a bit hefty on the mana cost, but given that in a lot of my games I wasn't playing much by the 4th turn, meant that I would have 7 total mana by the 4th turn. If you don't have any card down ready to handle a 3-cost Zed, 3-cost Fiora, a 4-cost Yasuo, or just anything you find pesky in particular, this card will be your lifesaver. Provided that you anticipate when to use this card, that's the tricky bit, as your opponent might have a recall, a barrier, a stat buff, or a deny on hand to stop you, so be sure to use this card when you're sure they don't have a counter or when they've preemptively used all their mana, otherwise it'll be a huge waste. As for Riptide, this card will be able to disrupt your opponent's entire strategy. First, put your Nautilus on the field and watch as their precious champion that they've prepared to demolish you with gets shuffled back into their deck. That means any buffs or level up progress they've gotten on them is forfeit, and the best part is, they won't even know when they'll get back that card into their hand. Worst case scenario, if you can't get a Nautilus down for the bonus effect, it's still a decent stun card, as most stun cards sit at the 4+ mana range for the exception of Guile, but that's a slow spell, so it might work to your detriment. The last card I want to talk about is Shipwreck Quarter. Sorta. Let me explain. It's a 7-cost 7/5 that can go down to 3 to 0 cost with a 10/8 increase. So already it's a pretty decent unit in and of itself, but the real shining star here are the treasures. And if you've been hanging on to your toss spells, anytime the treasures are tossed from the deck, they're placed in your hand instead. So if you're trying to get one, this is an easy way to do so. There are 3 treasures, all of which are 5 costs, each with their own ways of turning the tide, and I'll explain them in order of least to most favorite. The first is Keelbreaker. This one's my least favorite because there wasn't often a scenario where it was more beneficial to use it. Its effect is that it deals 5 damage to all units in play, yours included. So unless you're in a scenario where your opponent A has more cards on the field than you that will die after using this card, B, where you have no cards to defend yourself with, or C, more of their units will die than yours upon playing, you're not going to be using this card a whole lot. And with regards to that last scenario, I often don't play in that scenario because it meant all those high stat cards I have are going to die fairly easily to low cost blockers or another spell that my opponent may have. So unless you're in one of those first 2 scenarios, I'd hold off from playing it. Next is Plateworm Egg. It's a pretty straightforward card, it'll summon 3 vicious Plateworms, but it can be game changing since they'll have deep, going from 5/5 to 8/8. Plus, they're fearsome, so if your opponent doesn't have any or a handful of 3+ power units, that's a lot of free damage you can pull off. They're also a great defense in a pinch, so there's that. And lastly, my favorite, Treasure Trove. And if those last 2 weren't all that impressive, looking at you, Keelbreaker, then this one absolutely is, because when I say this one makes or breaks a game, it really does. Treasure Trove gives you 5 cards. What, that wasn't impressive? Oh wait, sorry, there's more to that. It gives you 5 of any card, excluding champions, in the game for 0 cost. Now of course there's a catch to this card. The first and foremost is, well, RNG. Now, I'm a bit of a weirdo, but I love RNG, because RNG brings out the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and I find RNG is the most fun part of a card game. Remember when I said at the beginning about fun over winning? Yeah, this is what I was referring to. You could get some of the most OP cards in the game for no cost, or a spell that you can't use or a low cost card. In regards to the spell thing, all 5 cards you get are fleeting, so they'll disappear on the next turn if not used. But just like Plateworm Egg, you could be in the most dire of straits, down to the wire, on your last gasp of breath. Then, suddenly, a shining beacon of hope. But just like Plateworm Egg, you could be in the most dire of straits, down to the wire, on your last gasp of breath. Then suddenly, a shining beacon of hope. Alright, before we conclude this video, there's one more thing I want to talk about. Let's call it the secret sauce of the deck. Remember that toss mechanic I mentioned? I mean, I've been mentioning it all game, sure, but what if I told you it's more than just a mechanic to level up, or boost some card stats? What if I told you it's your secret weapon? Let me explain. The cards I've been talking about with the toss mechanic have some sort of give and take, but I haven't talked about 2 cards made specifically just for tossing. Jettison and Salvage. Jettison and Salvage are both burst spells, costing 1 and 4 respectively. With regards in player order, you'll always want to play Salvage over Jettison, because while Nautilus copies back any 4-cost monsters, all spells tossed are forfeit. Okay, so that's all well and good, but where's the secret sauce? The key word here in both these spells is burst. Let me paint the picture. It's your opponent's turn to attack. He has some pretty hefty units, maybe a champion, and with your current setup, you're about to lose your playing field to block his incoming damage. But then you look at your deck, only a handful away from deep. You look at your mana, just enough. Now to your hand, toss spells. You know what you must do. And that's the secret sauce. An unaware opponent coupled with a lucky hand is one of the ultimate game changers of this deck, and is also one of the ways to win without getting your Nautilus off. So to round off this video, I'll summarize and explain. This entire deck centers around holding onto your cards, tossing the right cards, finding ways to get your Nautilus in play, or mounting an awesome surprise attack. Keep in mind that against decks centered around winning early, you'll usually lose since this deck centers around mounting your front in the mid to late game, and you'll be taken down unless you're lucky. But against other late game setup decks, victory is sure to be yours. Have those fearsome powered up units to destroy their setup, and then destroy whatever scraps they'll still left behind, unless you're facing a Tryndamere. I'll save that for another video. Thank you very much for watching. This is the first time I've actually written a video with an entire script. I wrote in one sitting in fear of losing pacing or some great ideas, and I'd appreciate any genuine criticisms you might have to improve my future videos. I'd also appreciate it if you share this video to anyone still learning the game, or anyone who plays who might find this interesting. I trust that those playing went through the tutorial and understand all the basics, but if you'd like, I could make a how to play video covering everything as well as tips and tricks to utilizing the systems to your full advantage. You already know what to do if you like this video and want to see more content, so I'll take this time to mention that I stream at twitch.tv/Psychometry. That's with 3 Ys because someone else just has the word. I don't have a schedule yet because quarantine's thrown my sleep schedule out the window. Not that I had much of one to begin with, but as soon as I find the optimal times to be streaming, I'll be sure to let you know. Alright, that's all from me. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to stay psycho. Peace.